And everyone, this is one of our board members, Al Lauer, who's going to introduce our next presenter, Laura Smith. So Al, take it away.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Scott, to introduce Laura Smith. Laura, as Scott mentioned earlier, is archivist in the Archives and Special Collections of the University of Connecticut Library, where she's worked since 1999. Collaboration between and among nonprofits, profit organizations is an essential means of expanding the richness of our mission. In these difficult times, collaboration is more compelling than ever. Laura represents one such collaboration with the center, which has proven very productive over the past 2 years. Today, Laura will discuss the highlights of the Thomas Dodd Research Center's railroad resources available in the digital repository, as well as the workings of the archive for researchers who wish to make use of those resources. So let me welcome Laura to the virtual podium.
Hello, thank you, Al. I'm happy to meet you. And Scott, I'm going to share my screen.
Great.
Giving clearance to do that.
You should have, yes, there we go.
So, okay. So, hello, everyone, and thank you, Scott. Thank you, the center, giving me this opportunity to talk about the collections that we have at Archives and Special Collections of the UConn Library. Throughout my talk, I'm just going to refer to us as the UConn Archives, just to make it clearer. I wish you were all with me. Here I am, all by myself, in Stuart, Connecticut, at the Dodd Research Center. I wish you could all be with me. As Scott had told you earlier, we will be having the conference 1 year from now on October 2nd, 2021, God willing. And I hope many of you can attend. So let me talk a bit about our collection in Archives and Special Collections, and about how we serve our researchers who look to use our collections. So we are located in the Thomas J. Dodd Research Center, which is in the middle of the University of Connecticut campus in Storrs. Our building opened in 1995. We're coming up on our 25th anniversary. We hold the rare and special book collections, the university archives, and archival collections gathered on many different topics. Many are Connecticut or regional history, but there are wide exceptions. We have alternative press and activism collections, natural history, literary, human rights. In fact, that initiative, the Human Rights Initiative, began in the 1990s with the building of the Thomas J. Dodd Research Center. We have a staff of 8. 6 of us are archivists. We all have kind of our thematic focus. Yes, I'm archivist for the railroad collections, but I also oversee the business and the labor collections and a couple of other smaller subject areas. None of our collections circulate. They all must be viewed in the reading room. And here, it's as if we entered into the building, and immediately in front of you is, from the foyer, is our reference room, and you're looking into our reading room. Under normal times, we are open Monday through Friday, 9 to 4. Our materials don't circulate. Everything must be looked at in our reading room. We have the regular archival policies for registration. We have very high security protocols. You see here we have our reference desk and the glassed-in reading room. So we always have a staff member at our reference desk. As I said, security of the collections is paramount to us. We are an open collection. We have no restrictions on access. We're a public university, open collection, no restrictions on access unless for some reason it was imposed by the donor of the collection, which we do try to limit when we collect. Sometimes we'll put restrictions on access if the item is too delicate or can't be viewed because it's too delicate, like glass plate negatives and, and other very delicate materials. All of our collections are the property of the university. We no longer accept materials on deposit or with unreasonable restrictions. Here we are in our reading room, very comfortable reading room. So if you ever come for research, this is where you'll be. We are a closed stack area, so right now you're getting a view of the stacks that you wouldn't if you were at the conference. If we were really on site and you were at the conference right now, you wouldn't be seeing this. But we're closed stack. All of our materials must be requested at the reference desk and viewed in the reading room. We have 24,000 square feet of storage space with over 1,000 named collections. And a named collection can be literally like one item or thousands of boxes. The core of the collection, which I'm going to start talking about, the records of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad, is our single largest collection under one name. It clocks in at 3,050 linear feet. So it's and that's just the core collection. So here's another view of our stacks. I can't really talk about the collection without really talking about the history of the New Haven, but frankly, I'm not going to talk about the history of the New Haven because I don't consider myself in any way a historian of the New Haven Railroad. I don't want to embarrass myself by talking about the history of the New Haven, but in a nutshell, railroads came to our area in the 1830s, and they formed, as many eastern railroads did. They formed from city to city, town to town. Well, in 1872, the Hartford and New Haven Railroad and the New York and New Haven Railroad formed to become the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad, which is better known as the New Haven Railroad. And that railroad company spent the next 30 years buying up all the small, the smaller railroads that kind of constituted the southern New England region of Connecticut, Rhode Island, southern Massachusetts, and even into eastern New York and into New York City. The goal was to get a continuous railroad line from the financial centers of New York City and Boston. At the time, these two cities were the financial and cultural hubs of the United States. So, which I know many of you will dispute, but there we are. So a couple of the New Haven's claims to fame is that it pioneered mainline electrification by using high voltage alternating current single phase overhead catenary. It electrified its main line between Stamford, Connecticut and Woodlawn, New York in 1907, extending the electrification to New Haven. Okay, so I told you I oversee the business collections as well. Well, in the 1980s, and I wasn't employed, as Al told you, I came to UConn in 1999. But in the 1980s, the UConn Library decided to focus itself on collecting archival collections related to Connecticut business. So we got an NEH grant. And among the collections that came were the records of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. When the successors to Penn Central decided to disperse the records to many academic institutions, the New Haven Railroad materials came to UConn. And we also got Yale, materials from Yale, and also there were some other materials still at the company's main office building in New Haven, Connecticut. So it all came together at UConn. The collection, so what we have, so we are considered the official repository for the records of the New Haven Railroad. The corporate records are mostly presidential and upper administrative records, a lot of real estate, financial, early legal documents. The largest component, and here we get a view of them, are the predecessor railroad lines, those railroad lines that were formed prior to 1872 that then got sucked up by the New Haven. And what they saved were the board of directors minutes and the financial documents of these railroads, like the New York and New England, the Central New England Railway, the Housatonic, the Naugatuck, the Old Colony Railroad. We have the records. Oh, and a lot of steam lines. We got these records as well, but they're mostly board of directors minutes. So, like many archives, once you start becoming known for a certain type of research, other collections kind of come your way. So we started getting collections, records of photographers, people who collected annual reports and maps, and got research files, and little the records accumulated from pet projects that people did, with their railroad interests. Right now we're at just under 80 separate collections that are railroad related. I want to speak just a bit on generally how we collect the materials. When I am working with a donor, I am not thinking I'm not thinking what is the artistic element of these photographs, who's the photographer. Frankly, that's not important to me. Although, with that said, knowing the photographer of the photographs is important to kind of put them in context. But we are a research facility. We're a research library, and our focus is to provide primary sources for historical research. So that is how I am determining the value of the materials that come to the UConn archives, that come to the railroad collections. I want to know, do these materials that are offered to me, do they provide a unique resource, something we don't already have, something that provides a piece of the puzzle to the historical record? We get many different types of people who use the materials, certainly students on campus and scholars, PhD students, but also I deal with a lot of lawyers and property owners, preservation consultants, genealogists, the media. I mean, it's really extraordinary about how the materials are used. So I want to talk about actually, before I go on to that, I just want to talk about if you are interested in doing research in the archive. I'm going to be showing you how do you go about finding out what is in the collection. But before I say that, I want to tell you that if you have yes, we have an open reading room. Yes, you can just stop. You can just come in. You happen to be in the vicinity of Stumpf, Connecticut. Yes, you can just stop in and ask for something in the railroad collections. But I strongly recommend that if you have a very involved question, please contact me ahead of time. I work very closely with our researchers. I help them think about resources that might not be readily apparent from our online sources. A lot of times I will have the materials ready for when you come to make your visit, or I can do very limited research for you. Just so you're not coming to stores and finding out that we don't actually have what you're looking for. So, please do contact me. I can give you a lot of information before you come all the way to stores. So let's first talk about, we do have a web page. Frankly, the web page kind of leads you to other sources. Again, and you see our web page is lib.uconn.edu/location/ASC. ASC is Archives and Special Collections. But really, the best source to go to when you're first trying to figure out, does UConn have sources that can provide information for my research, is our collection management system, which is an archive space-based system that has our finding aids and other details of what is in our collections. And here's the website address: archivesearch.lib.uconn.edu. So if you get to the page and you just want to see what's in the railroad collection, we do have a tab up here for collecting areas. And then you can click and just see the list of what is in the The railroad history collections, you see right now we have 77 collections. Again, one collection can be 3,000 boxes, or it can be one small box. It's by the creator of the collection. And so you can browse the materials. If you click on one of the named collections, it will bring you to what we call the finding aid to the collection, which gives you the basics of who created the materials or collected the materials, what's the scope, what are the dates of the collection, and also it will provide a listing of the details of what is in the collection. Okay, so also, you can do keyword searching. If you search just for railroads, you see here you get almost 11,000 hits. So as with Google, as with any search engine, try to narrow down your search. Okay, so the big thing that I want to talk about is our digital repository. But first, let me talk about the Connecticut Digital Archive. UConn is the provider. We run the Connecticut Digital Archive, which holds digital resources for 60 cultural heritage institutions in the state of Connecticut. It's a great resource. Frankly, there are other repositories, libraries, archives, historical societies, museums in the state that have their sources in the digital repository, and many of them are, there are a lot of railroad collections just in this main database. So you don't just have to go to UConn. You can see what is offered all through the state. The Connecticut Digital Archive is at ctdigitalarchive.org. But if you just want to see what we have here at UConn, you can go just to our dedicated website for our digital repository. Again, we are part of the CTDA, but this is, our website, archives.lib.uconn.edu. So there is a way to just kind of browse, just to look at the railroad collections. I recommend going to we have a couple of thematic ways that we've organized the materials thematically. Business and industry or Connecticut history are the best way to first see the railroad collections. Of course, with everything, we have a keyword search box. Here, I've done a keyword search for Central New England Railway, and I came up with 230,000 hits. That's because it searches under Central for anything with the word Central, New England, and Railway. So as with any search engine, please narrow your choices, or frankly, do broad searches and just get an idea of what we have. You see here on the left, you can kind of narrow down your searches by topic, by place, by corporate name, or material. So there are ways to narrow down your searches. I want to highlight a couple of things, kind of some special things that we have in the digital repository. But first, I want to answer a question you might have on, how do we decide what we're going to put in the digital repository? We have 1,000 collections. I'm sorry, I can't tell you even how many linear feet, but it is many thousands of linear feet. Each archivist has to make the decision of what is crucial in our collections that we think is most relevant to put in the digital repository. It's a lot of work to prep the materials for scanning, to have them scanned in our main lab in the main library, to describe the materials, get them placed inside the repository. So we have to make very careful decisions on how we will apply that time and labor to getting the materials online. Personally, when I'm choosing what railroad materials to put online, I'm always thinking in terms of, what are people asking for mostly with reference queries or when they come to the reference desk. So, I'm trying to get materials that are online that I know are high interest. Also, I got to tell you, if a donor gives us money to, when they make the donation, if they give us additional money to scan their collection, well, we'll scan well, that goes to the front of the line. Then we will scan the collection because, we got extra money for it. Okay, so let me just talk about some highlights from the collection. One of the first collections that I pushed to get online were the set of valuation maps for the New Haven Railroad. We have an almost complete set of val maps, and they are just these beautiful detailed maps. In 1915, the Interstate Commerce Commission demanded all the nation's railroads to create these detailed maps and other documentation, photographs, and and other ways of accounting for the property that every railroad owns. So the New Haven created these maps, and here you see this is a map of Hartford, of New Haven, Connecticut. They created these very detailed property maps that still today are used for people's layouts, for by property owners, by preservationists. I get an enormous number of inquiries about these val maps. So we do have an almost complete set in the digital repository. Another big set of materials that I have in the repository is the New Haven Railroad's employee newsletter called Along the Line. I get a lot of genealogy questions. My grandfather, my great-grandfather worked for the railroad. Do you have any kind of personnel records? Well, unfortunately, we don't. Okay, click too fast. Unfortunately, we don't, because when the materials were donated, the successors of the Penn Central did not donate personnel records as well, for obvious reasons. They are, confidential and, Anyway, so a lot of times I will direct people to Along the Line because because these publications are, they're chock full of information about the workers themselves. Another set that I put up recently is the New Haven Railroad Writer's Digest. And if you all, as members of the CRPA, if you subscribe to Railroad Heritage, then, or receive your copy of Railroad Heritage, in this latest issue, I did write about the New Haven Railroad's Writer's Digest, which the railroad created during World War II to help their civilian riders understand why service was getting so bad during the war. So we have the complete set that is owned by UConn. I do not know if we have at every publication. This is an interesting collection. This is why I love being an archivist, because there's so many connections between materials. This collection is a literary collection, but it is also railroad related. This young woman, Louise Gathney Flanagan, lived from 1867 to 1949. She was the wife and sister of railroad workers of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. And she was what she considered herself the poetess, the poet of the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen, Lodge number 201 in New Haven, Connecticut. She wrote these very flowery Victorian poems about the good work of the railroad trainmen, but also a lot of these men were getting killed on the job. It was very dangerous work, and so she would write these memorials to them. So the digital repository has a very large cache of these beautiful poems that were written by this woman to her railroad men. We recently received a collection of materials from that were created by John Merritt, who is a station agent for the New Haven Railroad in Lee and Great Barrington, Massachusetts. And the best part of the collection was a set of journals that he kept where he gives details about his work from 1933 to 1940, but also he also mentions things that were happening nationally, internationally. You know, the late 1930s were a pivotal time in international history. They're really just a wonderful set of journals. We received this really gorgeous, you know, one of those really long. It was tightly wrapped. It was very brittle. We sent this to our conservation lab. It measured, you know, almost 40 inches by 8 inches, and it shows the New Haven Railroad engine house at Cedar Hill in New Haven in 1940. This small set of photographs show Mr. Thomas Hogan, who is this gentleman on the right, and Hogan worked as for Travelers Insurance, and he apparently was directed to ride the trains during World War I. He rode the trains posing as a hobo, and he but his real purpose was to look for sabotage and prevent theft and damage, and look for German spies on the trains during World War I. So we received these photographs from Hogan's grandson, who lives in the state. Before I go on to showing you some other materials, I just want to mention that a really unbelievably tremendous resource for primary source documents is the Digital Public Library of America. As you can see here, you know, they have well over 40 million images, texts, videos, sounds all across digital repositories in the United States. The DPLA points to the collection, meaning, you know, it will bring up the search results, but then bring you back to the original digital repository of New York Public Library, the Smithsonian Institution, the National Archives, and, you know, happily, the Connecticut Digital Archive is in the DPLA now. It's just a tremendous resource if you are looking for historic photos, trains, stations, anything. It's incredible. We receive a lot of collections from people. I'm just going to show you some scenes. You know, just frankly, you know, the collection is so large, I could really only just choose images that I think are interesting to look at, and I think kind of illustrate what we have in the digital repository. Mr. Francis Donovan was a collector in, he lived in Medway, Massachusetts. He had a very strong interest, a very wide-ranging, lifelong interest in 19th century New England railroads. We received his collection right after his death in 2006. His widow called me almost immediately after his death, and I was able to get his collection. It's an incredible resource on anything with the history of New England railroads. To some other photographs of interest in the collection. This is a very famous train, the New England Limited, which is also known as the White Train or the Ghost Train, because it was literally painted white. And when it would it traveled from, you know, New York to Boston, and it traveled diagonally. It didn't go along the shoreline, which most trains did. It went diagonally through Middletown, Connecticut, and then on to Boston. When it traveled at night, its white exterior was considered ghostly, so it got the name the Ghost Train. Mr. Edward Ozog gave his collection a few years ago. A lot of quirky photos in his collection. I really love his collection. Here, I thought this is interesting given our time period now, where we're all mask wearing. Sandblast House at the Reedville, Massachusetts Railroad Yard in 1941. This one I liked. I thought it was appropriate for this conference, just to show you some railroad fans at a fan trip in Maybrook, New York, in 1947. You know, we just saw in Mike and pardon me, the other gentleman who spoke just previously to me, the Armstrong turntable. This is in Winsted, Connecticut, and this photo was taken by a very famous railroad photographer, Charles Fisher, who was one of the founders and president and director of the National Railway Historical Society, and he apparently was also editor of their bulletin. This was taken in Taunton, Massachusetts, where Mr. Fisher was born. Taunton was also the center of locomotive manufacturing in the 19th century. Another just interesting information, interesting photograph of a signal station in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. This photo, when I first looked at this photo, I thought, oh, that's along the Connecticut shoreline. I told you that New Haven Railroad was an electrification. It pioneered mainline electrification. You see here the anchor bridges and the catenary. But as you can see from the back side of the photo, this is the back of that photo, it says Bridgeport, Massachusetts. And I looked at that and I thought, no way, there's no way it's Massachusetts. And number one, there is no Bridgeport, Massachusetts. And, you know, it's very important to archivists, very important to historians that we get the right information, you know, the location, the date, circumstances of an image. But as we can see, at the time of the creation, sometimes the information that's written that accompanies the material is incorrect. So this is one of those circumstances. Mr. David Peters was a tremendous collector of the New Haven Railroad and New England railroads. He worked for the New Haven beginning in 1963, and then he worked for Penn Central and then Amtrak. He told me, unfortunately, we lost him. He died this past spring. A lovely man. I miss him terribly. He was very generous with me, and frankly, keeps generous with many historians who needed to use his collections. He told me that on his lunch break, he would kind of wander around the railroad yard in New Haven and see materials that were going to be discarded, and he would take them and put them in bring them home, and he created a railroad museum in his basement, which was really a tremendous resource. Here is just some photos from the collection. I told you we have the valuation maps. These photos were kind of created to accompany those valuation maps. They give the date. They, if you can see, they give the valuation numbers of the property. This is just a drop in the bucket of really of what's in this extraordinary collection. I'm trying to get a lot of the Dave Peters materials online because it's just an amazing collection. Fred Otto Mccaskey was a photographer. He lived in the Springdale section of Stamford. Let me see. He was born in 1888. He died in 1952, and he was, he's just kind of a railroad fan, and he was allowed access in the Stamford Railroad Yard, and he seemed to make it his mission to take a photo of every steam and electric locomotive of New Haven Railroad in the 1930s. So it's just an extraordinary set of locomotive and train images. I want to tell you, when the collection came to us in the early 2000s, it came in those black paper scrapbooks, the ones that deteriorate really quickly. So I had a student assistant remove every photo and put them in archival quality sleeves, and we have them in these binders. You see here the backings of from that black paper. When the student assistant removed the images, I was very careful to have him put all the images in the order that they were in the scrapbook. I wanted to document how Mr. Mccaskey deliberately organized his collection. I didn't want to resort it. I wanted it to be shown as Mr. Mccaskey had meant it to be. Harry Brown was an electrical engineer for the New Haven during the time of its electrification. He lived from 1886 to 1980. He got these beautiful, track view of the anchor bridges, catenary of the whole electrified zone of the New Haven. There are a lot of these photos in the digital repository. You all might know Jack Swanberg. He's a frequent writer for many railroad publications. Jack is donating his collection to UConn, and the great thing about Jack's collection, you see, well over 2,000 of his photos in the digital repository. Jack is helping me with the description for the materials. When we put the materials in the repository, he's giving me the descriptive information, so I get it. I get it straight from the horse. I get, I don't have to figure out what's going on in the photo. Jack has kept meticulous notes of virtually every photo that he's taken, and we are benefiting from him giving us that descriptive information. So here, just Jack Swanberg. If you're not acquainted with him, Jack Swanberg was first hired for the New Haven Railroad in August 1961, but in October 1962 he left railroad work to join the U.S. Navy. He served in Vietnam. In 1966, he returned to the railroad, to the New Haven, but he then worked for New York Central, and then Penn Central, and then Metro North commuter line. He retired in January 2000 as lead train master for the New Haven station. So here are a couple of, and Jack Swanberg was a worldwide traveler. What I'm showing you now are really just his regional and American photos, but we have photos that he took when he was in Europe, when he was in Mexico. We'll be getting more and more photos into the repository as much as we can, given that it's, we need his descriptive work, so it goes kind of slowly. This one's taken in Detroit. Mr. Seth Holcomb was a Connecticut, he lived in the Hartford, Connecticut region. He loved steam trains. So once the New Haven Railroad stopped their steam trains in 1954, he pretty much stopped taking photos of trains. So all we have are his steam photos, but they're pretty extraordinary. William Higginbotham was another just really avid rail fan photographer. The thing about the Higginbotham materials is that he was meticulous about with the descriptive information. Every photo that was donated, he gave. You can see here, this description is verbatim from what he gave us. What accompanied the photographs. We have the dates, the point where he took the photo, the train, where the train was traveling from and to, just really meticulously described. And also, frankly, a photo like this, it's beautiful. I love this kind of scene. Bob LeMay has given us many thousands of his photos. He mostly the Connecticut and New England area. He's really documented kind of his collection. Even though he started photographing in the 1950s, his collection is strongest from the 1980s to frankly present day. So he has given us all of his photos, mostly Metro North, Amtrak. Bob, by the way, is the co-author with the late Joseph Snowpeck of Diesel's to Park Avenue, the FL9 story, which was published in 1997. Bob, very recently, just within the last several weeks, he donated 200 digital files of a series of photos that he took showing the renovation of the Niantic, Connecticut Railroad Bridge. I have yet to put those online. I'm going to be doing that as soon as I can. This is just one photo of that series. James Wall grew up in the Boston area. When he was a young man, he in the 1930s took many photos of mostly New Haven and Boston and Maine photos. These photos, I know at least one of you who are tuning in today would be delighted with these photos. 4 years ago, when we had the conference at the UConn Archives at the Thomas J. Dodd Research Center, Mr. Robert Joseph Valetsky spoke about the photographs of Louis H. Benton. The beauty of the digital repository is that it doesn't really matter what collection it comes from. So these photos are kind of strewn around many different collections that we have at the UConn Archives, and but they're brought together digitally. You know, you could do a search for Louis H. Benton images, and you see these very unique images that he took. These are just 4 of many. I want to make a comment about this image, again, from the benefit of Mr. Valetsky, who I know is tuning in right now. Hi, Bob. This photo, when we originally looked at this photo, actually when Bob was in our reading room and he looked at this photo, and here you see this man on top of the boxcar. Well, if you looked closely at the photo, it was actually whitened. And we realized that someone had put a small drop of whiteout on this photo, but Bob knew that there was actually a person on top of that boxcar. So we brought the photo to our conservation lab and the whiteout was scraped off. And here we see Louis Benton's traveling companion, Francis Drake. I'm sorry, I don't know if I have that right. Mr. Drake. I'm sorry, I forgot the man's first name. Mr. Drake, and he was clowning around on top of this boxcar. So again, you know, the documentation of materials, you have to be careful what you see. Sometimes the photo isn't the truth. It isn't the truth. You have to see what you see. So okay, so I will often, this is our gallery space. We often create physical exhibits of our materials. When, if you come to the conference next year, I will have an exhibit up highlighting many of our collections. Let me just make sure. Okay. So, and also we do, we have a Facebook page. I often will highlight our collections on Facebook. Again, it's Facebook UConn Archives, and we have a Twitter feed, UConn Archives. If you are going to, once you talk with me about, you know, if you're interested in our collection and we talk about what you want, and if I'm going to do any scanning for you, or if you want copies from the collection, I do direct you to our reproduction request form. I want to talk just for a minute, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. I want to talk very quickly about making a donation to the archives. And frankly, I'm going to speak for every archivist. Please do not leave it for your children to find an archives for your collection. You really don't want to do that. I work with a lot of widows and children of collectors or photographers, and you might think that your children and your widow is going to take the time and the care to find absolutely the right repository for your materials, and they will. But frankly, my experience is that they're moving fast. They you know, usually they will call the archive at the point where they're cleaning out the house because they're putting it up for sale. They just want to get rid of the stuff. And so they call the archives and they expect us to, come to the house immediately. It's just the point I want to make is that it really is for your benefit to feel comfortable with the archives. It's going to take your life's work. You want to know what their policies are. Do they have a digital repository to make your collection widely available? Do they have the type of storage and preservation facilities that you would want your collection to be? Will they value is your collection among others that are that people would use it as a historical resource, or that they're going to make your collection treat it as the treasure that it is? If you don't take care of that kind of information, then you lose control of it. And so I just want to make that point, kind of, I'm speaking for all archivists again. Another thing I want to say, and I'm going to say this as gently as I can, we're an archives. We're not the town dump. And I say that gently. What I mean is that no archives is going to accept just, boxes of material that someone just kind of swept into the boxes without any kind of deliberate accounting of what went into the collection, went into the boxes. When I accept materials for the UConn archives, it's very important to me to know that everything in the boxes that come to the archive is meant for the archives. I'm not going to go through the collection and pick out, the stuff that obviously should not be with the collection. Again, I've had a lot of calls from donors who want me to come with boxes and just kind of haul everything out of their basement. And I'm not going to do that, or in very limited way. I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do that because we want the material that's meant to be saved. We're not going to go through your collection to decide to make these decisions without it having to be made deliberately. A very quick just advice on ways to preserve your collection. What I tell people who hold collections, please do not store it in the attic, the basement, or the garage. And unfortunately, those are the three worst places that you can store your materials, and those are the most likely places that people store their materials. It's really the worst place you can put it. It's subject to heat and humidity. If you're looking for a place within your own home to store your materials, do put them in boxes just to keep dust and other detritus from your collection, and put it into an interior closet, like your bedroom closet or something where it's not against an exterior wall. So there we are. Just one last word before I take questions. For the last 6 months, we as you all we're dealing with the pandemic. I am allowed access into the archives 1 day a week. So our reference room, our reading room is closed, at least for fall semester. We're not quite sure what's going to happen in spring semester yet. If you are interested in any of the collections, if you go through the collection management system, if you go to the digital repository and you're interested in anything in our collections, please contact me. I am at laura.katz.smith@uconn.edu. And let me know what you're interested in. And I can, we're doing just more advanced research for people, more than we normally would pre-pandemic times. I make scans from the collection. I send them as digital files. We're really trying to make our collections relevant. Even during the pandemic, we want them to be used. We want them to be cited. So please let me know if you are interested in our collections and if there are any questions. Scott, I cannot see the questions panel right now. Should I?
Oh, sure. Well, I think if you unshare your screen, or at least yes, if you stop screen share, it should come up.
I'm gonna. Oh, what I do? Okay, great.
There we go.
Here we are. Thank you, Scott.
Oh
Okay.
no, thank you, Laura. Great presentation, and
Thank you.
really, your words were ring very true for us at the center, and we appreciate you making a lot of those points. They're really important for everyone to consider as you think about what's going to become of your life's work that you've put so much time into, and it's important to put some time into figuring out where it's going to go and how that place is going to care for it. So, really important messages there. Thank you.
Yeah. So, any questions?
I haven't seen any come in yet, but certainly we welcome them, and we'd also be happy to take questions now for Mike and for Rolf if anybody has those either. We will start our next show on time at 2:35 Central Time in exactly half an hour. We're happy to extend the Q&A session as far into the break as we need to answer questions for both of these two previous presentations, and I will start the attendee show briefly so we can run through that once during the break as well. But yeah, in the meantime, Laura, I guess one question I would have is just are there any new collections that you have in, or any new initiatives? I know it's just hard to keep up with everything that's already happening, especially during COVID. But if there's anything upcoming that you'd like us to know about, I'd be very excited to know that.
You mean collections coming in, or really the Dave Peters collection is the biggest and most important collection that came in. I need another hour to really describe what's in the collection. Photos, annual reports, documents from the earliest use of the railroad up to virtually the present day. It's a very comprehensive collection, and the benefit, the great thing about the Dave Peters collection is I was able to get one of our student workers to create an unusually meticulous list of what's in the collection, which I know as an archivist, I know that the more detail you give to describe a collection, the more people know about the collection, and the more detail they can they can request things by item. Well, that detailed finding aid to the David Peters collection has enabled people to really pinpoint individual materials that they want, need a copy, or they want to come to research. It's frankly, it kind of zoomed to we keep statistics on our most used collection. Within 6 months of making that collection available, it zoomed to our top 30. Among 1,000 collections that we have, it zoomed to the top of the collections that are requested.
Oh, that's huge. It's great to have some documentation right out of the gate. That's really nice.
Yeah.
And actually, one of our members, Tom Nanas, who's up in Connecticut, we were trading some messages during your presentation, and he's very familiar with that collection and is really excited that you guys have it. So maybe a follow-up will be in store for next October with any luck.
We'll talk about it.
Sounds good.
Right now, the exhibit that I'm planning for to have up during the conference in 2021 is the New Haven Railroad in the 1950s.
Oh, sounds great.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I think any of the surveys the Trains Magazine and Model Railroader have done about their readers' favorite eras, the two that always come up are the present day and the 1950s. So that's always popular territory, especially with the diesel transition happening then.
Right.
So actually, Adrian, our archivist, asks when you started collecting born digital images, and how big of a portion of your railroad collection are they right now?
For digital, very small. I did mention the Robert LeMay photographs. They came as digital files, and luckily, I am going to take those digital files and just put them in the digital repository. But I'd say 99.8%. 99.9% of the railroad collection is paper photographs. It is physical materials that we then have to. They are not born digital materials.
Okay.
I'm still. A lot of our other collections, certainly the university records, are coming in as digital files, but the railroad collections they remain as physical items. And, I'm
Sure.
more with the historical, I'm not doing, I don't deal with a lot of current photographers. So that's the biggest. Yeah. Any other?
Any other questions for Laura right now? And Mike and Rolf, I've seen a couple come in for you. If either of you are still here or available to jump back on, we do have a couple of questions for you. I see your Rolf.
Yeah. I'm back.
And Laura, if we get any more for you, stick around. That I'll if you could for a moment, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
So let's see here. So Rolf and Mike, Elron Lawrence asks, are there any significant language barriers to traveling some of the places that you pictured? And any websites that you suggest for planning train travel in Europe?
The last questions about the websites, because I don't plan any travels except for seeing the big boy maybe. This is beyond my knowledge at the moment, because 10 years ago there were different websites. We had Web 1.0 at that time, and it has changed a bit. But the language barriers, yes, this Greece especially, they don't talk much English there, especially in the north. In Athens might be, but I learned back then might have changed since that the all the signs were all in Greek letters. There's no Latin letters there. Even the bus timetables, train timetables, all was in these Greek letters. And I relied heavily on the stuff my British friends supplied me with. They had the translations of the internal timetables with all the flag stops. They weren't advertised in the official timetables. So let me thank Philip Warmont. Here I thought I'd give him a praise, because he helped me a lot to get all the stuff and to get around. And he's still traveling heavily. He just returned from Eastern Europe these days, and he's a great guy, and he helped me a lot. So you someone who might have questions, find Philip Warmont on Facebook, and he might give a helping hand.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Coming back to that, I would actually say that traveling, Greece is a little bit of the exception, but getting around in Austria, Italy, England, obviously, but Denmark, all these places, English is really kind of a second language now for a lot of people, especially younger people, and you run into very, very little language barriers. There's also a really good website called The Man in Seat 61. I'll post a link to it, but they have a lot of really good travel information on there about ticketing and things like that. So there's some good resources available to help kind of navigate this.
That's one of my favorites too, Mike. I actually just put the link up for that in the chat window. And Psalms mentions raileurope.com. And I think, isn't it true that a lot of the various railway companies there, I know, like the DB website, you can use to book tickets all over Europe, not just necessarily in Germany.
Correct. Yeah. And they now have apps too that are amazing. They're in English language. There's an app right now called Train Radar, Zug Radar, that actually shows you where the trains are pretty close to real time. So there's some really cool new technology things. But to get back to the main point, it's easier now than ever for someone from the U.S. to travel in Europe, and well, COVID aside, language-wise, to come and visit. So.
No, that's certainly been my experience in the times I've been so fortunate as to be over there. I did also, we got a question from Dave Soms, who's curious about how extensive are the routes for the city night trains right now in Europe.
They are expanding quite a bit. That was kind of an interesting thing because they were pretty much given up for dead. And it was actually the Austrian Railways that kind of restarted them on some different places, and they're expanding a lot. So if you go to Nightjet, I think it's nightjet.com, they're showing the different trains available now. But it started kind of in Austria with the resurgence, but now Switzerland's picked up on it. They're building their network. Germany's picked up on it. So now, for example, you can go to Vienna to Barcelona through Switzerland, way up north to Hamburg, things like that. So that's and it's really a great way to travel at night because, you know, you don't lose time in a hotel. You get on the train at night and you wake up in another city. So I really enjoy using them.
Hey, Laura, that actually, doesn't Jack Swanberg have some international content in his collections?
He does. You know, I debated whether or not to add that to my presentation. It could go on forever. Yes, we're getting more and more in. It will be. There's not a lot right now. Mostly it's from Mexico. His trips when he was a young man, when he went to Mexico, and also someone he was in Spain when he was a young man. But that will be forthcoming. You know, we're very gradually getting Jack's collection into the digital repository, and Jack has bequeathed his collection to us in UConn. So we'll be getting all of it, you know, when his time comes.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, we understand.
We hope it's not going to be for a long, long while. But in the meantime, we are getting. We are able to put much of it online.
And Mike and Rolf, actually, that leads to a question for both of you. Are you aware that of what the big archives for historic European railway photographs might be, and if any of those are available digitally?
Oh, that's something I'd have to deflect to Rolf. I'm a little too new here.
There's one in Germany. I know, but I haven't, because I'm not very active in the scene.
Sure.
They are dealing with the preservation. They collect archives and stuff. And I was thinking about donating my German part, the archives to them. But I don't know if they have digital access to the collection. I don't know. I have never used it because the time when I wrote my books, I could have used them, but they weren't there at that time. So,
right.
So, but in German, at least one.
Sure.
And I got one more question from Nikos Kavori. He missed me explaining the concept of the Plandampf. Plandampf is a German specialty, basically in the 1990s in East Germany, because back then some smart guys make events on the railways with the regular trains hauled by steam engines. Course of 1, 2, 3, 5, we had regular freight trains, express trains, international trains hauled by steam engines, partly out from the Deutsche Reichsbahn, or later from the Deutsche Bahn. They had Plandampf events all over Western Germany as well. In the up to the I think the last was a few years ago. Yeah, this was a really fun time, but wasn't crowded in the end, so I quit attending these, making all the exception once again for the big boy to have even bigger crowds. Yeah, big crowds.
I think, well, Mike, I think you answered this in the chat, but I think we also got a question just about the red trim that was used on European steam locomotives. Was that just what the reason was behind that?
Well, didn't they paint the drivers red for visibility?
I don't know. Frankly, I don't know. I don't know.
It's a tradition for sure.
It's a tradition. Yeah, it's a tradition. Visibility, they had several. They had the buffers marked white in the Second World War for visibility, and they kept this concept to the modern days in Germany. Yeah, the drivers painting red. I think it's someone who started it, and they found a pretty black boiler and red drivers. Why not? I like it.
I like it too. I like it.
Any other questions right now for any of our past three presenters here? All right. Well, Mike and Rolf and Laura, thanks all three of you very much for sharing your work and Laura, your collections with us. It's a real treat and has added immensely to our day. So thank you all. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it as well.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for taking your time to set up this great program and all the efforts technically, and yeah, fantastic to be part of it.